Hello and welcome to my channel, and welcome to a Sunday morning meetup in which I discuss 10 British novels from the 1920s. The 10 novels I have picked represent each year from 1920 to 1929. Book number 1 was published in the year 1920. The Mysterious Affair at Styles by Agatha Christie. The Mysterious Affair of Styles is a detective novel and was Christie's first published novel. It introduced Hercule Poirot, Inspector, later Chief Inspector Japp, and Arthur Hastings. Poirot is a Belgian refugee of the Great War. He is settling in England near the home of Emily Inglethorpe, who helped him to his new life. His friend Hastings arrived as a guest at her home. When the woman is killed, Poirot uses his detective skills to solve the mystery. The book includes maps of the house, the murder scene, and a drawing of a fragment of a will. This first mystery novel by Agatha Christie was well received by reviewers. She made £25 from this novel, and her publishers must have made a fortune. Other books published in 1920 include Queen Lucia by E.F. Benson, the first novel in his Map and Lucia series. In Chancery is the second novel of the Forsyte Saga trilogy by John Galsworthy. Women in Love by D.H. Lawrence is a sequel to his much better The Rainbow, which was published in 1915 and follows the continuing loves and lives of the Brangwen sisters Gudrun and Ursula. Book number 2 was published in 1921, Chrome Yellow by Aldous Huxley. Chrome Yellow is the first novel by Aldous Huxley. In the book, Huxley satirises the fads and fashions of the time. It is the story of a house party at Crome, a parodic version of Garsington Manor, home of Lady Ottoline Morell, a house where authors such as Huxley and T.S. Eliot used to gather and write. The book contains a brief prefiguring of Huxley's later novel Brave New World. Mr. Scogan, one of the characters, describes an impersonal generation of the future that will take the place of nature's hideous system. In vast state incubators, rows upon rows of gravid bottles will supply the world with the population it requires. The family system will disappear. Society, sapped at its very base, will have to find new foundations. And Eros, beautifully and irresponsibly free, will flit like a gay butterfly from flower to flower throughout a sunlit world. Other books published in 1921 include The Master of Man by Hall Caine, The Secret Power by Marie Corelli, Memoirs of a Midget by Walter de la Mare, and She and Alan by H. Rider Haggard. Book number 3 was published in 1922, Ulysses by James Joyce. Ulysses by Irish writer James Joyce is considered to be one of the most important works of modernist literature. Ulysses chronicles the peripatetic appointments and encounters of Leopold Bloom in Dublin in the course of an ordinary day, the 16th of June 1904. Ulysses is the Latinized name of Odysseus, the hero of Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey, and the novel establishes a series of parallels between the poem and the novel, with structural correspondences between the characters and experiences of Leopold Bloom and Odysseus, Molly Bloom and Penelope, and Stephen Daedalus and Telemachus. In addition to events and themes of the early 20th century context of modernism, Dublin and Ireland's relationship to Britain, the novel is highly elusive and also imitates the style of different periods of English literature. The novel's stream of consciousness technique, careful structuring and experimental prose, replete with puns, parodies and allusions, as well as its rich characterization and broad humour, have led to it to be regarded as one of the greatest literary works in history. Joyce fans worldwide now celebrate the 16th of June as Bloomsday. I read this novel with a guidebook in my late 20s over a 6-month period. I read it again 25 years later, which was enough to last me for the rest of my life. Other books published in 1922 include Miss Mapp by E.F. Benson, Aaron's Rod by D.H. Lawrence, The Triumph of the Scarlet Pimpernel by Baroness Emma Orczy, and Jacob's Room by Virginia Woolf. Book number 4 was published in 1923, Riceyman Steps by Arnold Bennett. The story takes place in 1919-1920, just after the First World War, and is divided into 5 parts. It deals with the final year in the life of its main character, Henry Earl Forward, a miser with a slight limp who keeps a second-hand bookshop in the Clerkenwell area of London, at Riceyman Steps. Henry harbours a secret passion for Violet Arb, a widow who inherits a neighbouring confectionery shop nearby. Violet, who sees in Henry a financially secure future, finally decides to marry him after a short courtship. However, Henry's parsimony drives the married couple into an increasingly wretched existence. He is aghast, for example, when Violet spends £14 vacuuming his dusty shop as a wedding present. He begins eating less and less, even foregoing meat for cheese, and refuses to go to the hospital to treat his undernourishment when the doctor and his wife insists that he does. Their lives, in which Henry's passion for money and his obstinacy finally consume himself and his wife, are contrasted to that of their loyal maidservant Elsie Spricket, and it is Elsie, despite her extreme poverty, who brings life and a future to the bittersweet tale. Other books published in 1923 include Antique Hay by Aldous Huxley, Kangaroo by D.H. Lawrence, Men Like Gods by H.G. Wells, and The Inimitable Jeeves by P.G. Wodehouse. Book number 5 was published in 1924. Beau Geste is an adventure novel by P.C. Wren, which details the adventures of 3 English brothers who enlist separately in the French Foreign Legion, following the theft of a valuable jewel from the country house of a relative. Although written in 1924, the novel is set in the period before World War I. Michael, Beau Geste, is the protagonist and an archetype. The main narrator is his younger brother John. The 3 Geste brothers are portrayed as behaving according to the English upper-class values of a time gone by, and the decent thing to do is in fact the leitmotif of the novel. The Geste brothers are orphans and have been brought up by their aunt, Lady Patricia, at Brandon Abbas. John and Isabel, the daughter of Lady Patricia, are devoted to each other, and it is in part to spare her any suspicion of being a thief that he takes the extreme step of joining the French Foreign Legion, following the steps of his older brothers. The main plot is the disappearance of a precious jewel known as the Blue Water. Suspicion falls on the band of young people, and Beau leaves England to join the French Foreign Legion in Algeria, followed by his brothers Digby, his twin, and John. Throughout the book and adventures, Beau's behaviour is true to France and the Legion, and he dies at his post at Fort Zinderneuf when it comes under attack. Digby is also subsequently killed in a skirmish with Arabs. The last survivor of the three brothers, John, returns to England and is welcomed by their aunt and his fiancée Isabel, and the reason for the jewel theft is revealed to have been a matter of honour and to have been the only decent thing possible. Other books published in 1924 include The Three Hostages by John Buchan, a Richard Hannay novel, The Man in the Brown Suit by Agatha Christie, A Passage to India by E.M. Forster, and The Constant Nymph by Margaret Kennedy. Book number 6 was published in 1925. Pastors and Masters by Ivy Compton-Burnett is a short novel. Called a work of genius by The Spectator, it was the author's second novel, but the first in which she introduced the characteristic style of clipped, precise dialogue that was to make her name. It is largely a character study dealing with themes of tyranny, female subservience, and unconventional sexuality within the setting of a boys' preparatory school. The greater part of the book consists of a character study of the staff and their small circle of friends, the masters and the pastors of the title. Other books published in 1925 include Sorel and Son by Warwick Deeping, The Painted Veil by W. Somerset Maugham, Carry On Jeeves by P.G. Woodhouse, and Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf. Book number 7 was published in 1926. Mistress Nell Gwyn is an historical novel by Marjorie Bowen. The story depicts the life of Nell Gwyn and her rise from an orange seller to the mistress of Charles II of England during the 17th century. Bowen states in the preface that very little is known about Nell Gwyn, and what history and tradition do tell us of Nell Gwyn has been told as a decorative romance, where no liberty has been taken with what we know or believe to be truth. Great affairs have been left out, and details of the reign of Charles II are provided only as a background for the figure of the heroine. Other books published in 1926 include The Murder of Roger Ackroyd by Agatha Christie, The Land of Mist by Arthur Conan Doyle, The Plumed Serpent by D.H. Lawrence, and Clouds of Witness by Dorothy L. Sayers, a Lord Peter Wimsey novel. Book number 8 was published in 1927. The Story of Ivy is a melodramatic novel by Marie Belloc Lowndes, sister of the more famous Hilaire Belloc. It portrays Ivy Jervis, a beautiful but ambitious young woman whose frustrations with her impoverished husband push her to murder him and let the blame fall on another. It has a strong vein of mystery and sensation, yet provides a variety of characterizations and some observations and commentary on life in the 1920s. The story was filmed as Ivy in 1947, which was directed by Sam Wood and starred Joan Fontaine in the title role. Other books published in 1927 include The Casebook of Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle, Sir Percy Hits Back by Baroness Emma Orczy, a Scarlet Pimpernel novel, Mr. Mulliner by P.G. Wodehouse, and To the Lighthouse by Virginia Woolf. Book number 9 was published in 1928. Decline and Fall by Evelyn Waugh was Waugh's first published novel. Decline and Fall is based in part on Waugh's school days at Lancing College, undergraduate years at Hertford College, Oxford, and his experience as a teacher at Arnold House in North Wales. It is a social satire that employs the author's characteristic black humour in lampooning various features of British society in the 1920s. The novel's title is a contraction of Edward Gibbon's The History of the Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. The title alludes also to the German philosopher Oswald Spengler's The Decline of the West, 1918 to 1922, which first appeared in an English translation in 1926 and which argued, among other things, that the rise of nations and cultures is inevitably followed by their eclipse. Waugh read both Gibbon and Spengler while writing this novel. Waugh's satire is unambiguously hostile to much that was in vogue in the late 1920s, and themes of cultural confusion, moral disorientation, and social bedlam. Both drive the novel forward and fuel its humour. This undertow of moral seriousness provides a crucial tension within Waugh's novels, but it does not dominate them. Waugh himself stated boldly in his author's note to the first edition, "Please bear in mind throughout that it is meant to be funny." Other books published in 1928 include Last Post by Ford Madox Ford, Point Counter Point by Aldous Huxley, Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H. Lawrence, and Mr. Bletsworthy on Rampole Island by H.G. Wells. Book number 10 was published in 1929. Brown on Resolution is a nautical novel written by C.S. Forester. It is set during World War I. The hero of the novel, Seaman Brown, is the sole able-bodied survivor of a sunken British warship who is able single-handedly to discomfort its attacker, a German cruiser, long enough to ensure its destruction by its pursuers. The novel opens with Brown wounded and dying on Resolution Island. The story is then told in flashback. The first part of the story tells of Brown's birth as a result of a liaison between his mother, Agatha Brown, and a Royal Navy officer, Lieutenant Commander Richard Saville Saumarez. It describes his upbringing with Agatha as an unmarried mother in Edwardian England, and her instilling into him of a sense of duty to the Navy and to his country. As soon as he is old enough, Brown joins the Navy, and on the eve of World War I is serving on the cruiser HMS Charybdis in the Pacific. In the second half of the story, Charybdis is sunk by the German cruiser Zython on a raiding mission in the Central Pacific, and Brown, with 2 or 3 wounded men, is picked up by the raider. As the Zython was damaged in the exchange, her captain plans to pull into an isolated Pacific anchorage to try to repair his vessel. In the novel, he chooses Resolution Island in the Galapagos Islands. The resourceful Brown escapes, steals a rifle and a small amount of ammunition, and makes his way ashore. Her captain having already careened his vessel, the vessel's main battery could not be brought to bear on Brown, and he was able to pick off exposed crew members who are trying to repair her punctured hull plates. In Forester's description, Resolution is an impenetrable tangle of scrub and thorn bushes, making it difficult for shore parties to run the hero to ground. Brown is eventually mortally wounded by a lucky German shot. He never learns that his actions delayed the repairs long enough to ensure that the German vessel fails to escape her British pursuers. Ironically, the senior British naval officer of the force which sinks Xiphon and benefits from Brown's action is none other than now Captain Saville Samires, Brown's father, although they do not know of each other. Other books published in 1929 include The Last September by Elizabeth Bowen, The Seven Dials Mystery by Agatha Christie, The Man Within by Graham Greene, which was his first novel, and A High Wind in Jamaica by the Welsh writer Richard Hughes. In part 4 of this series I will discuss books by British authors published in the decade from 1930 to 1939. So that's all folks, but I'll be back soon with another Booktube video.